think I've made it obvious that I'm a pretty big fan of roguelites. There's a ton of amazing ones out there, like Dead Cells, Risk of Rain 2, especially Risk of Rain 2, oh my god, love that game. Gungeon and Wizard of Legend, and looter shooters are fine too. I had some fun with Destiny 2.
I can do a flip.
But if you like both of these things, oh man, Gunfire Reborn is such a fun combination of both genres. Developed and published by Interactive Entertainment, who have previously made Chinese mobile games as far as I can tell. I've really tried googling around and I can't seem to find any information on them. But here comes their first game on Steam. It popped up somewhere in my suggestions, and when I first looked at it, I took notice of the reviews. What the fuck? Why does it have overwhelmingly positive? It's still in early access, it had like 8k reviews. I had to know what was up with it. The game immediately throws you into this tutorial stage. Honestly, it could be done a little better, as it's cutscene showing a thing, press this button, cutscene showing a thing, press this button. But it does a decent job of explaining how the game works. So you play as the Crown Prince, this little cat with a big ass hat, and when you start a run you have this boring but functional pistol, and at first it's your standard FPS affair. WASD movements, click on heads for big boy numbers, but the controls, oh, they feel fantastic. You have a dash to zip around behind cover or weave your way around enemy attacks, and a bunch of poison smoke grenades, and a magical ball that takes a chunk out of enemy health and stuns. His abilities feel so great to use. The short cooldowns and the abundance of grenade drops means you're constantly rewarded for making smart use of the tools you have. Running into a room, clearing out small fry with a smoke grenade, dashing away from enemy attacks, firing the ball to temporarily take an enemy out of the fight, then topping it off with some firepower from the guns. Oh, and the weapons are so cool. Generally, they're well balanced.
Alright, shocked. Meaning
Emphasis on generally. The animations and the sounds for the guns are satisfying, which is something that's incredibly important in an FPS. Who wants to shoot a gun if it doesn't feel fun to do? And the variety here is really interesting. You know, you have your basic assault rifles, SMGs, and rocket launchers, yeah, but then you get stuff like a lizard that shoots out bombs, a dragon flamethrower, and laser gloves. What separates the guns further are the inscriptions. These can change the stats of a gun drastically, and some may even change the way you use certain weapons. For example, I had these like lightning gloves that it's a decent laser and it's fantastic in inflicting status effects. If you're lucky, you can get this inscription that turns it into a fucking crowd melter as the lightning bounces between enemies, meaning they all get the shock status effect. Shock makes him take 10% more damage, which is useful for obvious reasons. A huge part of Gunfire's gameplay is the three elements: fire, corrosive, and lightning. Some weapons are guaranteed to do elemental damage, and others can get it from rare inscriptions. And each of these elements is strong against one of the game's health types, and that influences what guns you should consider picking up in a stage. Every shot from these weapons has a chance to inflict a status related to the element, like fire sets them on fire and they take damage over time, and corrosive reduces their movement speed, allowing for easier headshots. So where this begins to get interesting is when you start to stack different effects on an enemy. Inflicting two different statuses will also add a third effect depending on what elements were used. So shock and burn will cause manipulation, which makes enemies attack their allies instead of you. Shock and Decay causes miasma, a damage over time that spreads between enemies. It also stacks with itself, and it's incredibly strong due to that. Burn and Decay causes Explosion, which... I love this system as it forces you to really think about what guns you should use, as you can only carry two at a time. Sometimes it's better to drop your favorite go-to weapon for something that has the right element that allows you to melt crowds or beat the next boss faster. All of the elements and statuses are powerful enough in the right situations, so sometimes you actually need to stop it and really think about what you should do. That's something Gunfire does really well. There's a lot of decisions and sacrifices you have to make during every run, which makes it super replayable. There's these red chests that give loot but have some sort of risk or payment required. Shops sell guns and items, but you have to decide between spending money there or upgrading your current weapon, and at the end of every stage you're given a skill point to spend in your ascension tree. You're given a choice between 3 randomly selected passives to upgrade. Most of them revolve around your abilities like increasing the damage on the grenades, and some are just passives like increasing elemental damage. Some upgrades can be stacked and become unbelievably powerful if you get that passive 3 times. Since it's RNG though, it's likely you will not get what you want, so you'll have to learn to adapt to whatever the game throws at you, instead of fighting against it. Especially with the scrolls, these are passive items that can drastically affect how you play the game. Like, my favorite one is easily Elemental Torment. It gives you a brief 100% status proc chance buff when you swap weapons, so I flick between 2 elemental weapons all the time. There's other scrolls that affect weapon swap, and generally the variety of them means that you can find your own powerful build if you use your head. And finding fun weapon, ascension, and scroll combinations is probably why I've dumped 50 hours into the game. Scrolls are found in these vaults, which are mini areas with objectives that range from platforming to taking down a mini-boss. Generally, these are quite fun and break up the gameplay enough to stop it from getting repetitive. They're also somewhat hidden in every stage, as they're these glowing cracks that have to be shot, and they reward exploration as some are hidden in the nooks and crannies of the areas, so you have to keep an eye out. But do you want to know what's better than an eye? 8 eyes. Gunfire has 4-player multiplayer, and even having just one other person changes the game so much, and is a huge reason why I've been playing it for so long. Since there are 3 elements and everyone gets their own drops, you'll end up strategizing with your teammates, since you can give scrolls and weapons to them if their build would benefit more from it. Usually when me and my friends clear out a stage, we go back, buy stuff, and trade items so we have a smoother time.
I got a golden score!
What? Dude, I got the ray gun mark too!
Ooh, an aura of venom.
Hey, give me it.
No.
Now.
Yeah, okay.
Why you were having fun. Yeah.
When your HP drops to 0, you're down for a short amount of time before you're actually out of the game. In multiplayer, a teammate can revive you by interacting with you, and this leads to some really tense situations in clutches. But if all else fails, you can spend some soul essence to revive yourself once if you're desperate. Soul essence is dropped from all enemies and is spent after dying in the talent tree, the main form of progression in Gunfire. Most of these talents are honestly a bit boring, as most of them are just increased stats and bigger numbers, but some are a bit more interesting, like having the ability to reroll the shop once, so you're more likely to find the items that you want. Leveling up talents increases your talent level, which is key to unlocking the other characters. So far, there are 2 additional characters, Ao Bai, the tanky dual-wielding dog, and Xing Yan, the melee-focused bird. They each have their own ascension tree and are very distinct from each other. Their abilities and playstyles allows for even more interesting builds to come up with, which adds even more replayability. You get bored of the cat, go play with the dog and laugh at how much fucking damage you deal. If you get bored of that, go jump kick people in the face with the bird. They're relatively balanced as well, so there's good reason to try them all out. The game's presentation is decent as well. While the music is functional, fitting, but forgettable, the visuals have this simple, kind of polygonal style. While I'm assuming that's more of a budget constraint than an artistic choice, it does look quite nice. I quite like the enemies too. They have a lot of really cool and memorable designs, and are mostly fun to fight against. I do think the gun dudes from the second area could do with some tweaking though. I think some sort of indicator that a bullet is going towards you would be nice, maybe? Because I remember hearing a lot of complaints from my friends whenever they just get shot in the back and die almost instantly. They all feel pretty fun to fight against with unique attacks, and while some enemies are a pain, especially in groups, it usually feels fair when I screw up. There are moments that aren't fair, but those are pretty rare, and it's early access, so I can kind of look past that for now. The boss fights are pretty decent as well. I feel like the first one is the best one, as it's like really aggressive in your face and has a lot of well telegraphed attacks that are really fun to dodge. The second one is good too. I'm not a fan of how it forces you to kill ads spread around the open arena when it disappears out of the fight. The second phase, it starts to use more aggressive attacks, but the weak point is so huge and easy to hit that every time we're like... The final boss is... okay. You fight a big boat, you can kind of sit far away and snipe the cannons whilst really easily dodging the attacks. It goes invincible after its HP drops past a certain point, so you have to pick up a cannonball and fire it back to go back to normal. Which is kinda cool, but that's about it.
There's a second phase, which is hard at first until you realize that you can just shoot the bombs out of the air, and that basically makes the fight trivial. Still fun, but feels anticlimactic. Overall, Gunfire Reborn left me very impressed. It's cheap as hell, fun to play, and by the end I ended up loving it. Sure, there is a certain lack of content, and there were some balancing issues, but the reason why I'm willing to look past that is because it's being constantly updated every week. Every update, some issue I have with the game is fixed, like annoying bugs, bouncing, or even new content, and the sheer amount of updates means any problem I do have disappears within a week. You know that clip I showed at the start where we absolutely blitzed that boss? Got fixed in like 5 days. The patch notes clearly show that the developers know what the players want to be added to the game, and they obviously listen to feedback if they manage to balance things so quickly. I don't think you can go wrong with Gunfire Reborn, honestly. I'd highly, highly recommend it to anyone.